Hello and welcome to AMA, Ask Media Anything. My name is Karen Winters. I'm an assistant professor of organizational communication at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in our Department of Communication. And I'm really happy to be here today to facilitate a conversation between our media professionals and our media audiences, you. The 2018 Pointer Media Trust survey indicates that local media outlets are trusted by a majority of Americans, even as trust in our national media is declining. And it's easy to understand why Acadiana has trust in our local media. In addition to providing us with vital information about our area, they're also active participants in our community. So, who better than to answer questions about our media than our own local experts? Here tonight to share his insight and answer some of your questions about the sometimes elusive media industry, we have Jamie Angelle, anchor for News 15 Today at KADN. To tell you a little bit about Jamie, he was born and raised in St. Martin Parish. And Jamie attended the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, where he studied mass communication while also working at KATC TV3. During his early career, Jamie covered a variety of national level events, including the crash of the Space Shuttle Columbia and Hurricane Lily. In 2004, Jamie left the news business to join the United States Army. After 13 years of serving his country, he was medically retired in early 2017 and returned home to Southwest Louisiana. Jamie joined the News 15 team in March 2017. Welcome, Jamie.
Good evening.
Yeah. So I want to tell you a little bit about our format for this evening. Tonight's program is about facilitating a conversation and really an essential dialogue between media producers and media audiences. So if you have a question for our guests during this live program, you can use the hashtag AOC Free Speech Week or hashtag AMA Jamie to ask us questions on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And you can also call us on our phone at 337-366-8951. And our questions will pop up right here on my tablet. And we'll have Jamie answer, of course, all the hard questions about what's going on in our local media industry today. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
I'm a
Thanks
little
for
sleepy.
being here.
It's a little past my bedtime.
Okay.
But I took a little nap.
That's
so
an
we're
early
good.
bedtime. But,
It is.
well, can you tell us a little bit about how you prepare to go on air and kind of what that world is like for you? What is your experience like?
Well, preparing, a lot of it is just reading through everything before I read through everything. When I get to the station in the mornings, I go through scripts. I read through them to make sure, one, that they're updated for the morning, and two, that they make sense, that, both sides are there, that there's, some sort of evidence or truth behind it, some sort of fact behind it, and just to make sure it's accurate.
And, facts and the content that goes onto air, that's something that has really been in question a lot lately as people talk about fake news. And, earlier this week, we've had conversations with media professionals who really said that, that's not necessarily an issue in our local media. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how you how individuals in the media industry pick the content that goes on air for our local communities.
I think one of the big things is, and I know that, especially in this market, we have a lot of new reporters, new talent coming into this market because it's kind of a starter market. And one of the things I try to mentor them in is make sure you're telling both sides of the story. Oftentimes someone will call and say, well, this happened to me and this is going on. Well, okay, that's this going on as you see it. Well, let's talk to the other people involved and make sure that the stories align. And if they don't, we'll find out why they don't align. But at least make sure that you're not just telling one side of a story. And I think when people think of fake news, often they're only hearing one side of a story. And it's extremely important, especially at the local level, to make sure that you're getting all your facts straight. You're getting all the information. And once you've done that, then you can present the story. Not everyone's going to accept it. Not everyone's going to agree with it. But as long as you're doing your due diligence and getting all that information, then I mean, you should be okay.
Now, Samantha from Karen Crow has a question that she submitted about the information that goes out. And she asked, with so many sources of information available these days, how do you decide which sources are reputable?
It takes doing some research, especially here locally. And we get a lot of, you know, oh, well, my cousin said this, or my uncle said, my mom said this. And um, it just boils down to doing the work. You have to do your research. A lot of people believe what they see on the internet. A lot of people absolutely 100% believe what they see on Facebook. And we have to ensure that we're not doing that. That if we see something, along those lines, then we have to do our research.
And do you have any advice for media audiences for how they can determine what content is reputable and what content is not?
Well, my opinion,
Yes.
Don't believe anything you see on social media.
Okay.
I'm not going to say anything, but there are reputable organizations out there. There are, tried and tested news outlets. Look for multiple sources. If you read one article that says one thing, and it sounds extreme or it surprises you, Google it, research it. Look for other sources. If you find that every media source out there is reporting the same thing, then yeah, maybe trust it. But if you're only finding it on one site, and it's one site that you maybe never heard of before, maybe second guess it. Look outside.
So we really have to check multiple sources.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you rely on one source of information and one source only, which I feel like that's where a lot of this fake news idea is coming from, is people who solely rely on one source for information, then that's kind of what they want, that you're giving that source the ability to control how you think. And I don't think that's okay in any case.
Okay, thank you for that. We have another question that came in, and I really like this one. It says, does the media have an ethical responsibility to the community? And do you have an obligation to disclose any financial considerations that you might have?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We always walk a fine line, especially in TV and local TV, between sponsorships and, trying to make sure that what we're doing is genuine. Like, for example, I do a fishing segment.
Okay.
Or a DIY segment sponsored by a hardware store. I do use that hardware store as a resource for content, but that's different. That's more of a feature segment. That's more of an entertainment piece. When it comes to the news side, absolutely 100%, there should be no financial interest involved. Say someone's running for office and they buy ad space on our channel. That doesn't mean we're going to focus on them during the campaign. Absolutely not. And if I encourage everyone, if you see us or any other media outlet doing that, call us out. That's just not the right way to do things.
And so you're saying, especially for your station, certainly that there really isn't a connection between
Absolutely
sponsorships, ad money, and what you all cover.
Absolutely not. When it comes to news content, hard news content, there is no connection between the financial side and the news side.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
I think that's really good for our audiences to hear. Now, I want you to talk a little bit more about this ethical responsibility, the ethical responsibility that people who produce the news have to our communities, especially given our role in a democracy, we the people.
Right.
What is your ethical responsibility to us to help us to be citizens who are informed and able to make choices to govern?
Well, I think first things first is, although it's hard, is to never consider my opinion, never consider my point of view, because it's not about me. I have a duty to deliver the facts, deliver news, deliver information. Back to the earlier question, how do I prepare? one of the things I have to do to prepare is to withdraw myself, my personal feelings from everything, in that news block. And my ethical responsibility is to provide accurate information to people and to give them all the information that they need, that I have, for them to make their own judgments, their own decisions, their own points of view.
And there are lots of different perspectives on how we understand objectivity
There
in
really
the
are.
news, right? So some argue that you can't fully remove yourself. So for you, when you say that you kind of place yourself aside, what is that process like? What does that look like?
Well, as an anchor, I don't want to say it's easier for me, but I would say that a lot of the burden falls on the reporters and the actual news gatherers that go out there when they're crafting these stories that we either introduce or read. A lot of it falls on them. But at the same time, it's our responsibility to ensure that they're also doing the right thing. Do I have opinions? Absolutely. Do I feel like I can share them? Absolutely not. Because I feel very strongly about the responsibility I have and the power, to put it simply. I mean, I'm on the air 4 hours every morning, and there are people who watch regularly. And I mean, that's a powerful state to be in,
Absolutely.
And I have a responsibility to make sure I don't abuse that power.
Especially given what we already know about Americans' trust in our local media. We
Absolutely.
trust you, right?
And we want you.
And
I mean, that's how we survive.
Right.
If you don't trust me, then I'm done.
Right, right. So thank you for telling us a little bit about how you maintain that trust. That's some great insight. Another question that's come in is, where is the Black media representation in our community, and how has your organization tried to incorporate the Black viewpoint?
I would say that our station has really done worked hard to create a very diverse news team. We have always strived to maintain that diversity, and I would say that we do have a very solid representation of the Black community, from our reporting staff to our anchors, and we do try to highlight many of the issues that affect the Black community. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for talking about that. I think that each week we've had that question that's been posed to our
And
guests.
by all means,
Yeah.
if any of the viewers or listeners want us to focus more, reach out. We're here for everyone.
And how do they reach out?
Social media, email, give us a call. I mean, I answer all calls that come to my desk. So call the station.
What's that phone number, by the way?
It is 237-1500.
237-1500. Okay, if you
And
have
I think my extension is 3316.
3316.
Or press whatever number it says for news.
Okay, if you want to get in touch with Jamie Angelle.
That's right.
Great.
Or
That's
jangelle at KADN.com and Jamie Angelle News on Facebook.
Wow. And I think it's so important to see how accessible our local media professionals are. So thank you for making yourself accessible.
Or if you see me, out and about, come say hi.
Well, and actually a question came in about that exactly. How often do you get recognized in public? And do you have any horror stories about that? Or great stories, happy stories?
I don't know. I wouldn't say horror stories. I get recognized a lot. I've only been an anchor at News 15 for, going on 2 years. And then before that, I took a long break from the business, like you said. I get recognized a lot more now. But for me, it's still a little, what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? Surreal.
Okay.
Surreal, because a few years ago, off in Iraq, like doing other stuff, and no one cared who I was. But now it's surreal. It's humbling,
Mm.
And then I realized that I guess I better make sure when I go out, my hair's,
You have to make
oh.
sure you have that extra product in your hair, right? Since
Never had to
everyone
worry about that before. I think this might be the longest my hair has ever been. So
I think you're having a good hair day.
thank
I
you.
think you have nothing to worry about right now. Another question that we have, have you ever lost your composure on television? Have you ever laughed or cried when covering a story?
Well, I'll start with a funny story. Hurricane Harvey. At the time, my co-anchor was Paulina Butska, and she was live out in the field and talking about flooded areas and how you should avoid them, and then subsequently fell into a ditch.
Oh, wow.
Live. And when the camera came back to me, I was stone-faced, and I said, there you go. Exactly why you shouldn't go out in flooded areas. And moved on. And I think the number one reaction was, how did you not lose it? And it's, I'm like, I don't know. I just, in that moment. But there have been moments where I've, cracked up laughing. And especially on our show, because we have 4 hours, at least in the second 2 hours, we do a lot more lighthearted news. Some of it's funny, and we're allowed a little more leeway as far as chit chat. And as far as losing my composure, a few times, and I would say that's it's human. I mean, I would challenge many people I would question people, especially with some of the stories we've had, and just the sheer sadness of them.
Right.
I would question anyone who didn't, in some way, show a bit of emotion. I'm not ashamed to show emotion because I'm human.
Right. It's
And-
a very human thing.
Yeah,
It's
and-
not weakness.
If I expect my viewers to connect with me, I expect that they see my human side.
Your full humanity.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And I think that's what makes you so relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough sometimes, but we're all human.
We are. We are all human.
We don't want robots.
No, it's a good reminder.
Yeah.
So, another question that we have, are you ever forced to censor what you report or how you report it? And if not, do you think censorship should be enforced in your workplace? Why or why not?
I think censorship should be enforced for things that are just inappropriate. I always think it's good if someone comes to me and says, hey, you might want to reconsider. I, at any point, will not, if I firmly believe that what I'm reporting is the truth and appropriate and accurate, will not change it because someone might not like it or agree with it, as long as it is ethical and the right thing to say. If someone from the sales department comes over and says, well, don't report this is a big sponsor. Well, I'm so sorry, but it's news. It needs to be told. I personally won't succumb to someone not wanting me to report something that should be reported because it might affect something else. Truth is truth and news is news.
Right.
Now, if it would cause a greater harm, to the community than good, then, maybe it's a consideration. But we have to step back, and I think we're pretty good about, as far as as a whole, a newsroom as a whole, is understanding what should and shouldn't be said or done.
And so as I hear you talking, I hear you saying, I hear that there are these slight value judgments that folks in the news media have to make. So what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, what might cause harm to the community. what do those things mean? Are there clear-cut examples of things that may be inappropriate, or clear-cut examples of what might cause harm to a community?
Um, trying to give you an example.
Mhm.
Well, I'll give you a good example, and this was part of my learning process. We had a story one day, and this one's pretty general and vague, so I can say it. And it involved Kanye West.
Mhm.
And I made a comment after the story about, mental illness. Some of the viewers were very upset, and it was a learning moment for me in that I need to think clearly before I say something,
Mhm.
and I'm very open-minded, and that I think that's another thing that's very important for media folks is to be open-minded, be receptive to feedback,
Mhm.
because again, we're human. I do have points of view. I do have a way of seeing things, but at the same time, maybe I need to be put in check with, hey, maybe you shouldn't say that. Maybe you
Mhm.
shouldn't share that opinion. And it really made me think back. And I actually reached out to the viewers who were upset, and I apologized because I realized that in that moment, I shared a little bit of opinion. I shared a little bit of Jamie's opinion,
Mhm.
which is not News 15's opinion,
Mhm.
which is not Fox or NBC's opinion. It was my own. Um, so I think that the main way of understanding that is just being open minded.
Okay. Okay. And I'm just going to skip over Kanye West altogether and go
Okay.
to the next question. Uh, another question that we have that's come in from Jamie Carter from Karen Crow. With several different media outlets on a nationwide level being the target of violence, such as the Baltimore Sun earlier this year, do you ever fear for your safety?
Absolutely. Um, for a while, I park behind the station,
Mm.
and I get there at 2 or 3 in the morning, and the security light was out, and it was out for a long time, so it's very dark back there. And I know that, especially after the or Annapolis incident, um, several of us pushed to the station leadership to make some of these updates, and I know that right now they're all actively working on doing even more security enhancements because especially given the events of this past week, with
Mm.
CNN getting a pipe bomb, and it is concerning. It is
Mhm.
concerning, and I think the more it can the anger at the media continues, the worse it's going to get. Thankfully, in here in Lafayette, we haven't really had any incidents like that, but it's always a concern.
Mhm.
I really want to encourage people to express their anger and divisiveness in a way other than violence, because
Mhm.
it's just not the answer.
Yeah, it's a different world that we're living in.
It is.
Thank you so much for having this conversation and giving us some really unique
Thank you.
insight into what's happening in our local news industry, Jamie. Thank you. And I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us for this episode of Ask Media Anything. We want to thank again our media expert for this episode, Jamie Angelle, anchor for News 15 Today, KDN. And we hope that you've enjoyed and learned something from this conversation. We want you to visit aocinc.org to find out about future episodes of AMA, Ask Media Anything, on AOC. And until then, we encourage you to stay engaged and informed with your community. Have a great night.